If I were moving to Florida, there are some homes that I wouldn't touch with a 10-foot pole. Let me show you what to look for. Let's go. I hear it all the time. I want a brick home. I don't want to live in a flood zone. Well, today I'm going to talk about 5 different things to look for on what I personally would or wouldn't purchase in a home, like different features and things like that that are in a home. So get your notes ready because you just might want to jot a couple things down. So I get clients moving to Florida from all different parts of the country and the world, actually. They know what they want in a home, and they generally want the same thing they moved from. They know their stuff's gonna fit. They know they've got the right storage, and they don't realize that living somewhere in a different climate, in a different space in the United States, that it may or may not work for them. So today I'm going to hopefully let you see things a little bit differently and why what might work in the Midwest or on the coast of California or up in New Hampshire, why that may not work down here, so that you could possibly save some money, save on utilities, have easier maintenance on your home. So hopefully you'll get some good tips here. So before we get started, I do want to throw like a little disclaimer. This is going to just really apply to those that are looking for your standard single family home, not your waterfront properties, not your, acreage, things like that. So just your standard, quarter acre lot type thing, single family detached home. So I do just want to make that clear at the beginning because some of these things don't necessarily apply. All right, so number 1, the exterior of the home. This is one that I get a lot, that people only want to look at brick, which I get it. It's easier to maintain. I think it looks nicer. It has a more upgraded feel. But their reasoning is typically because it is safer against termites. This is a myth, and I want to debunk it for everybody. So termites eat wood. Yes, they don't eat brick. However, the structure of the home, most homes are not block homes. They are stick-built homes. So the structure, when they're putting up the walls and everything, those are wood. So behind that layer of brick is wood. Termites can get into the weep holes of the brick. They can get into, the holes that utilities companies put into the home. They can get into the expansion joints of the slab of the foundation. So just because you have a brick home does not mean you will never get termites, because you absolutely can. The only, I don't even say fail safe, but the biggest security blanket you have against termites is getting that termite bond and having your home sprayed for pests, things like that. Yes, brick is harder for termites to get to, but it is not fail safe. Now, while brick may not deter termites, I do think it is a better option here in Florida for other reasons, mainly because it does give you that little extra layer of protection during storms. It is way easier to clean up. If you've got vinyl siding, which is a great option, it is a less expensive option. So if you've got a little different kind of budget, vinyl siding is great. The vinyl sidings are super easy to clean off as well. But for brick, generally speaking, you're not going to show, mildew as much, although you still can, but it is a little bit easier to clean up and maintain. Another option for siding is stucco down here. So I personally, I don't want to say I want people to avoid it, because it's not like that, but it is way more expensive to maintain and to repair. And we still have EFS stucco. So, and that is, there's some issues with moisture barriers and things like that, if it was done properly or not. So in our area, stucco really isn't as prevalent as it is in southern Florida, like Miami, St. Petersburg, that kind of thing. So finding someone that can, repair or maintain stucco sometimes is a little bit harder. So in our area, although my reasoning is not for termites, I do think brick is typically a little bit better of an option for an exterior. But you also have hardy board. That's becoming more and more popular, especially with the craftsman style homes. Hardy board is amazing. It is a little bit more expensive. So if you are getting a new build, it can be right up there with brick. However, hardy board, it's cement board is what it is. So it is also a pest deterrent. It is also a water deterrent, so it holds up really well. You really only have to maintain it by obviously keeping it clean, but every 10-ish years you might have to repaint it, maybe. And that's only if it's, getting chipped away, if it's like in a high traffic area, or maybe if the sun is bleaching the paint color. But it is another really great option as well. So that's something you might want to look at. But, so in our area, I would probably go brick, hardy board, vinyl, then stucco. So those are some options for you for exterior. Hey guys, it's Kristen Weller. This is Life in Navarre. If you still have questions after this video about different things that you are looking for and want to see if it's something that's prevalent here or not, all of my information is going to be popping up here on the screen. Give me a shout and I'd be happy to help you. All right, number 2. This one is kind of another hot topic button, especially for my Midwesterners. And that is how many stories the home is, whether it's a 1-story like ranch style home, or if it's a 2-story, that kind of thing. So again, we're talking about homes not on the water, because those homes I would most definitely recommend thinking about building up so that you've got that washout bottom floor. But if we're just talking, single family homes where we're removed from the water a little bit, having a single story home in our area is generally going to save you on utilities, if nothing else. Also thinking about hurricanes, because we do get storms, we do get hurricanes. If those 2nd-story windows are not wind resistant or hurricane rated, you're having to climb up a ladder and putting the window protection on those windows, and you are going to need and want to put that window protection on there, because obviously you're higher up, things are moving around a lot more. In our area, I would highly recommend trying to go for the 1-story, and I mentioned utilities, and that is because obviously heat rises. We are hot. It is hot down here. It is humid and it is hot, so you're going to be running your air conditioner 11 months out of the year. And if you've got 2 stories, trick is, if you absolutely must have a 2-story home, the most ideal situation is to have an HVAC unit on both floors. That way your first floor unit isn't running as hard as your 2nd-story unit. And so you can keep them at 2 different temperatures on your thermostat. So you would essentially be saving a little bit of money on your heating and cooling, because if you only have 1 unit and it's downstairs, it's fighting to keep the upstairs cool, because typically your thermostat's going to be downstairs where the unit is. And the same thing goes if it is upstairs. It's generally a little bit better. If you only have 1 unit and you've got 2 stories, you generally want it to be upstairs so that the thermostat is also upstairs. But still, your first floor is going to be freezing all the time. So if you have a 2-story home, you generally want, ideally you want the 2 units. Now, keep in mind that's 2 units to maintain, and that's 2 units to replace down the road when they both get old and need to be replaced. So, and yes, they are a little bit smaller than if you had 1 big unit, but you're still replacing 2 units, 2 systems. So in our area, I would probably recommend getting a 1-story home that you only have to deal with 1 HVAC unit. Now the other thing on this, and this is purely anecdotal, it's just something I've seen and experienced over the years. For some reason, most 2-story homes, they start to get really creaky on the 2nd floor within like 5 to 7 years. Any of the homes that I've been in that are 10 years and older, the upstairs is always just really creaky. And I don't know if that's settling. I don't know if that's just it's super humid here and maybe it's, making the wood softer. I'm not sure. I've never been in one it was so like bumpy, like sway, that it was structurally bad. And like I said, this is purely anecdotal, just something I've noticed. So that's kind of the other thing as well, is just, I don't know, for some reason it just seems like the 2nd-story levels just tend to get a little creakier more down here. Like, super anecdotal, but I still thought I would mention it. Anyway, so for levels of homes, I would recommend 1. So right now, if you're keeping track, a brick 1-story home. All right, so this is another one that I get a lot, is I only want a new home. A lot of people only want a new home because they don't want to have to deal with the possibilities of whether somebody else maintained it or not, and what they did to the property, what they were putting down the pipes, all that kind of stuff. I completely understand that. However, I do get some people that they only want the new homes because the building code is better. The standards to what it needs to be for hurricanes and things like that are better, which that is correct. Over the test of time, over the last 15, 10, 20 years, those codes and the building standards have gotten better, different, higher grade, whatever. However, let's take this into consideration. So if we're looking at a 1960s home, And generally speaking, Navarre doesn't have super old homes. You're going to get that more in like Milton and Pace and like Fort Walton and Pensacola, and maybe a little bit in like Gulf Breeze proper. But in our area, they don't get all that old. There's a lot of 80s and 90s homes. That's kind of like maybe some 70s. That's kind of like the cusp of age-wise. So let's just pretend we're a 1960s, 1970s home. And if your reasoning is because of hurricane standards. Now, I'm going to cheat and look at my notes, but since I went back as far as 1960, but there really wasn't anything. So 1975, we had Eloise, which is a category 3. At 92, we had Andrew, which by the time it came back to us, it was a category 3. Opal was a category 3. Ivan in 2004, Dennis in 2005 were both category 3s, strong category 3s. In 2018, I'm only mentioning this because I'll get somebody saying like, oh, what about Michael? Yes, we had a category 5. We did not experience anything from it. That was to our east in Panama City. They got hit the hardest in Mexico City Beach. Our area just kind of got the outer rings of the good side. So it was really just, I would equate it to probably like a category 1 storm. But so I just wanted to mention it, but we didn't really get effects from that. But we did get effects in 2020 from Hurricane Sally, which was only a category 2. And thankfully, since then, we haven't had anything, fingers crossed. So if you're looking at a house that's built in 1970, 1980, 1990, it has gone through some major hurricanes. And if it's still standing and it's still original, you know that house was built solid. So here's my take on this. The older homes, and this is anecdotal as well, but the older homes just had better craftsmanship. They had better quality of work, better labor. Yes, the standards might not have been the same, but the workmanship was way better. Whereas today, if you're buying a brand new home, I will tell you to research that builder. Not all builders are made the same. So research. Make sure you're buying something that you feel comfortable with that is a quality builder. Because like I said, they might have to meet certain standards, but the quality of the workmanship sometimes isn't all there. So kind of keep that in mind. Now, having said all of that, older homes, and I'm not saying to buy an older house versus a new house, I'm just saying kind of keep that in mind. Don't rule the old house out. However, your older home, if the plumbing and the wiring haven't been upgraded, if it's got an old roof, if it's got an old water heater, things like that, your insurance costs are going to be higher. So kind of the catch with that is, or the thing to look for is, if you are looking at a older home, make sure that the wiring is up to date, that it's not cloth wiring or knob and tube or something like that, that the electric panel isn't one of the bad ones, that the water heater and the roof are newer to meet for cheaper insurance costs. So there's ways to get around that and to make sure that you are in the better priced insurance, even if the home is older. But just have that in mind too. Like, yes, structurally the house might be great, and obviously you want to do a home inspection to make sure that it is. The catch with the older house is that you might have higher insurance costs. On this third topic, I'm going to wuss out and not give you a direct answer, whether to go new or whether to go old, because honestly, I think it just depends on the house itself. When you're going through the house, and if it's an older home and you can tell that it's been flipped a million times, obviously get a home inspection. That is going to be your safety net. That's going to be your, the home inspector can't see everything, but they can see a lot. So that's going to kind of be your safety net there. With the newer homes, do your research on the builder. Make sure that they are a good builder for you, that it's quality work that's good enough for you. So kind of do your research there. And the homes in the middle, like your, 2000s, 2005s, 2010s, you're kind of in the middle there. So you kind of still have to trust your home inspector, get those things done. But there's no right or wrong answer for the age of the home. I would just say keep your options open. Before we get into topic number 4, comment down below with some things that if these are, kind of hitting your trigger buttons, if they're things that you're looking for as well, or if maybe I haven't touched on the feature that you're absolutely needing in a home, because I would love to hear what it is. All right, number 4. Are garages. This is usually a black and white issue. Either they, my clients need/want a garage, or they just don't care. There's no in the middle. Typically, when they want a garage, it's because that's what they're used to. They're used to parking their cars in the garage. They're used to having an attic or a basement to store things. In our area, we don't have basements. We do have attics, and you can use them. We use ours. We put stuff up there all the time, and we've never had any heat damage or anything. But typically the attics here aren't super big. So it's usually just whatever you have above your garage is typically where you're storing things. So it is a little bit smaller of a space. But my people that want their garages typically are from the Midwest and are used to keeping their cars there because it snows and they're trying to, to keep the salt off their cars, things like that. We did the same thing. That's when we first moved down here, we're putting our car in the garage. We put a car in the garage because we had to have so much space for storage that it was just hard to fit 2 cars. And if you do have an older home, if you're looking at that 1990s home, more than likely, unless you have a small compact car, you're not fitting your truck or your minivan in that car because they're too long for the length of the garage. If you have a newer home, even sometimes, I've got people that have, F-250s or, Toyota Tundras that they can't fit it lengthwise in the house, even though it's a 2024 new build. So kind of keep those things in mind. But things that you're going to need here are, obviously we need storage. We need a place to store our stuff. When we first moved here, people kept talking about these yard buildings, and I wasn't sure what this was. I was like, what do you mean a yard building? It's basically a fancy name for a shed. Where I come from, your shed is where you put all your outdoor stuff. You don't really keep other stuff in there, but down here, people put everything in there. And we wound up doing the same thing. It was mostly yard stuff, and we kept the inside stuff in our garage, but people use the sheds or yard buildings, whatever you want to call it, for their storage because we don't have basements. And a lot of people will just get storage units and keep their stuff in there because then it's heated and cooled and you don't ever have to worry about, heat damage or anything like that. So if you're adamantly against garages or adamantly needing a garage, just know that I've had many clients say they absolutely need a garage and because they want to keep their cars in there, and I'll drive by and their cars are sitting in the garage or on the driveway. We all have our best intentions, but when it gets down to it and you don't have storage space, you're going to put it in your garage. So kind of just keep an open mind about things. In Navarre, again, we don't really have a ton of those older homes like Fort Walton does, where they've come and they've turned in that 1-car garage into more living space. It's not as big of an issue as it is in Navarre. Most of our homes have garages and it's not a big deal. But just kind of be open to the fact that you might not even be able to stick your cars in there lengthwise. And a lot of people down here, they park outside. The only time you really need to worry about pulling your car into a garage is if we do have a storm coming through. So, if you can move some stuff around to stick a car in, awesome. But again, measure it lengthwise to see if you can even fit one in there. Okay, so final topic, number 5 is location. And what I mean by this is either, flood zone or no flood zone, HOA or no HOA, on the water or not on the water. So let's go over HOAs first because that's kind of the easiest one. If you're someone that want chickens, that doesn't want to ever Airbnb your house down the road, that might want a fun, colorful house, a pink door or whatever, some fun plants or planters or things like that, you probably don't want to live in an HOA. There are lots of rules coming up that a lot of the HOAs are changing that you can't do short-term rentals. And as far as we're not incorporated, Navarre's not incorporated. However, HOAs can make their own rules. Holly by the Sea was one that they just a couple years ago. You can't have chickens anymore. So things like that, if those are things that you're looking for, just rule out the HOA because most of those you're not going to be able to live how you want to live. However, if you are someone that doesn't live too extravagantly as far as color on the outside of your house, you don't have odd animals outside, not odd, but more than just a cat or a dog. And if you, don't mind having to pull in your garbage cans and keep your grass a certain length, whatever, then HOAs are probably just fine. There's not too many super strict HOAs around here, and most of them are pretty inexpensive. For the majority, the ones around here are basically just ones to make sure that people are keeping their home, kept up so that there's not a bunch of pests around or that, people aren't, for lack of a better way of putting it, junking up a neighborhood, just to show that there's pride of ownership, things like that. And like I said, they're generally not too expensive. Maybe $500 for the year is a general good budget, if you will. And sometimes it gets you a couple amenities. Sometimes it's just the management of the HOA and maybe a sign, but the HOAs around here generally are not super strict. So kind of just, if you don't mind a couple rules, keep them in mind because like I said, there are quite a few. There's more than you think, but they're just generally smaller. Okay, as far as a flood zone or not a flood zone, if you think you're going to be here for maybe 3 to 5 years, that you're not going to stay around, you're not going to try to rent it, even long-term rental afterwards, then, I probably would recommend just kind of seeing what's out there. We do have a couple different flood zones as far as like an AE or an A in Holly by the Sea, and some of them even like kind of around the water, but they're not on the water. And those ones aren't going to be super expensive for your insurance, for your flood insurance. But as a general rule, all of Florida is in a flood zone. So there's X and there's 0.2%. Those two are the ones that you are not required to have flood insurance if you have a mortgage on the property. Everything else, you will have to have a flood insurance policy if you have a mortgage. Some of them are more expensive than others, obviously, and FEMA can come around and change zone you're in. It's usually every 3 years, but if we get a really bad hurricane come through, they might go ahead and just change it on a whim. So just know that that can always change. But we do have more than just X and 0.2% here, so it's always something to just think about. If you think that it's something that you're going to be here for a while, or maybe you want to come into it, then just find the floor plan that's right for you and the home that fits you, and then you can kind of look at your budget and see what's going to make sense as far as flood insurance and things like that. But if you're only going to be here for a few years, then I say why waste the extra money on insurance when something else might fit just fine as far as a property that's not in a flood zone. If it's just a house for a couple of years, then it doesn't need to be your perfect home, because you're not going to be in it for very long. So in my opinion, save the money on flood insurance and find one that's in X or 0.2. And then finally, if you're going to be waterfront or not waterfront, this is purely whatever you're looking for. If you know that, you're military, you're coming down here, you're moving here, and you'll never get a chance to live on the water again because you're going to move back to Missouri or Arkansas where there's, no water, kind of, sort of, then just do it. Like, it's fun. Like, this is a once in a lifetime opportunity in those kind of situations, so go for it. But just know that you're going to have a little bit more maintenance on your home because of the salt water. Your insurance is probably going to be a little bit higher, and the cost of that home is obviously going to be a little bit higher. But I do get asked that a lot, is whether I would live on the water or not. And it's truly just a lifestyle decision and a budget decision, because it does cost a little bit more to maintain the homes that are closer to the water. So that one, it's kind of a whatever you want. But having said all that, when we first moved here 17 years ago, we lived in Crestview, and even though we were still a good 30, 35, 45 minutes away from the water, we still would take our daughter down there at least once a month, but generally 2 times a month. And that's with carting all the toddler stuff and toys and whatever down there. So anywhere you live, really, you're close enough to the water where if you do, or you're moving back to Arizona where there's no water, even if you're not on the water here, like you're in Crestview or Milton or Pace, you're close enough to the water where you're going to go if it's a priority to you. So, if budget's a restriction, then I wouldn't worry about living on the water too much, because you can see it when you're just driving around, which is pretty cool. So for number 5, it just depends on how long you're going to be here, in my opinion, as to whether or not to spend that money on, an HOA or the flood insurance. So kind of a non-answer on that one too, sort of. But so there you have it. My 5 tips on what to look for and what not to look for, at least to think about when you're purchasing a home here on the Panhandle in Navarre, Florida. So I hope you gained some insight on things to look for when you're buying your next home down here in Navarre, Florida. And if you did, I would love a thumbs up, hit that subscribe button, and ring the bell so that you don't miss another chance to watch a video that I post about my beautiful home of Navarre, Florida.